The Manhattan skyline glittered beneath the terrace of Gerald Morrison's luxury penthouse as he raised his crystal champagne flute. At 63, the real estate mogul had built an empire on knowing exactly where everyone belonged in society's pecking order. Tonight's birthday celebration attracted Manhattan's wealthiest. 50 guests who shared his view that the world had a natural hierarchy. Take my helicopter for a spin, and I'll name your boy as beneficiary to half my wealth, Gerald announced, his words slurred with expensive cognac. He gestured toward the sleek aircraft resting on his private helipad, then turned his attention to the woman standing near the pool's edge. Diana Carter, 41, had arrived an hour earlier. As a certified aircraft technician, she'd been contracted for what should have been a straightforward equipment inspection. Her toolkit sat beside her feet as she absorbed the businessman's mocking proposition. Gerald's wife, Melissa, whispered to nearby guests, amplifying the spectacle. The crowd's interest sharpened. Nothing entertained the ultra-wealthy quite like watching someone get publicly torn down. "Everyone listen closely," Gerald commanded, drawing all eyes to him. This technician claims expertise with helicopters. Apparently, mechanical work somehow translates to piloting a $15 million machine. Harsh laughter rippled through the assembled elite. Diana's son worked 2 shifts at the regional airfield while attending aviation courses. His dream of becoming a commercial airline captain drove every decision she made. When Gerald mocked these aspirations, suggesting they required breeding and proper social standing, Diana's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "So here's my offer," Gerald continued, spreading his arms wide. "Complete 1 circle around this building in my helicopter, and your son inherits $400 million. The terrace fell silent, except for the city's distant hum. "And if I don't succeed?" Diana asked evenly. Gerald's smile turned predatory. "Then you'll sign a statement, to be shared with my 3 million social media followers, admitting that people from your background shouldn't reach beyond their station in life." Diana studied the helicopter, then met Gerald's gaze. Something flickered across her expression that several observant guests couldn't quite identify. It wasn't fear or hesitation. It was something else entirely. "I accept your challenge," she said quietly. Gerald clapped enthusiastically. "Magnificent! Someone start recording. This moment deserves documentation." What none of the celebrating guests realized was that they were about to witness something completely different from the humiliation Gerald had orchestrated. Diana's calm acceptance wasn't surrender. It was a disciplined response of someone who knew exactly what was coming next. But did Gerald Morrison just make the most expensive mistake of his life? What secrets was Diana Carter hiding behind her composed exterior? Stay with us to discover how one moment of cruel arrogance would unravel everything Gerald had built. Gerald basked in his audience's attention, completely intoxicated by the spectacle he'd created. His wife, Melissa, already had her phone positioned to capture every angle. "This will be perfect content," she murmured. "My followers love real-world lessons." Diana observed the commotion with unsettling tranquility. The guests formed a semicircle around the landing area, champagne glasses catching the terrace lights. Whispered wagers circulated about how quickly she'd abandon the attempt. "Before we proceed," Gerald announced dramatically, "let's ensure everyone grasps what's at stake." He invaded Diana's personal space uncomfortably. "You've been servicing helicopters for how long?" 2 decades, Diana answered without flinching. 20 years. Gerald projected to his audience. 20 years of maintenance work, and now she believes that qualifies her to command an aircraft worth more than most estates. Catherine Ashford, married to the city's mayor, quietly remarked to her companion, "Gerald's cruelty exceeds even his usual standards." But her concern dissolved into the crowd's laughter. Diana's fists clenched briefly, a micro-expression only the most attentive observers caught. Memories surfaced unbidden. Her 17-year-old son, Alex, balancing multiple jobs to fund flight school, studying aerodynamics textbooks while she reviewed technical manuals beside him at their kitchen table. "My son will pilot aircraft," Diana stated, cutting through the mockery. "He'll fly for carriers that people at your level could never afford." The resulting silence carried weight. Gerald blinked, momentarily rattled by her unexpected confidence. "How sentimental," he recovered quickly. But aspirations don't cover flight training costs. Do you comprehend what commercial pilot certification requires? $250,000 minimum investment. He addressed his guests. Imagine someone earning perhaps $45,000 annually thinking she can finance elite education. Each word landed like a physical blow. But something unexpected occurred. Instead of crushing Diana's spirit, Gerald's cruelty was feeding something she kept carefully controlled. Her gaze fixed on the helicopter with a familiarity that made certain spectators question why she appeared so comfortable around the machine. Marcus. Gerald summoned his executive assistant. Retrieve the documents I prepared. I want her signature before this farce begins. Marcus produced a clipboard with multiple forms. Gerald reviewed them with obvious satisfaction. There's an interesting provision here, he continued. When you fail, not if, but when, you'll record a statement confirming that people from your circumstances shouldn't aspire beyond their natural capabilities. Nothing personal, naturally, just social realism. Diana accepted the pen and signed without hesitation. The movement was fluid, completely devoid of tremor or doubt. Several guests began wondering if they were about to witness something entirely different from their expectations. What was Diana about to reveal? Why did her signature show zero nervousness? And what was the truth behind her calm confidence that was making even Gerald's closest allies feel uneasy? The answer would change everything. Diana approached the helicopter, and her entire bearing transformed. Gone was the cautious demeanor of an intimidated worker, replaced by the assured movements of someone intimately familiar with exactly where she was headed. She opened the aircraft door and examined the interior with eyes that recognized every gauge and control. As she adjusted the pilot's seat and tested the pedal response, the more perceptive guests noticed something disturbing. She navigated the cockpit as though she'd done it thousands of times before. "This is taking forever," Gerald shouted, his patience eroding. "Have you reconsidered? Nobody will judge you for acknowledging your limitations." Diana completely disregarded his provocation. Her fingers moved across the navigation instruments with methodical precision, checking altitude indicators, fuel levels, hydraulic systems. Each verification was executed with the discipline of someone who performed this routine countless times. Catherine whispered to her husband, Jonathan, "Observe how she handles those controls. That's not amateur behavior." Jonathan Ashford, who'd piloted small planes in his youth, watched Diana's cockpit movements with mounting interest. Gerald, drunk on power and the adrenaline of public cruelty, decided to escalate further. "Attention, everyone," he bellowed. "Since our amateur pilot is struggling to figure out ignition procedures, let's make this more memorable." He activated his Instagram live stream. "I'm broadcasting this to my 3 million followers right now. The entire world will witness this educational demonstration about social boundaries and misplaced ambitions." What Gerald didn't realize was that at that precise moment, Alex Carter, Diana's 17-year-old son and aviation student, watched the stream from a municipal airport hangar with his classmates. His fists clenched, but a smile grew across his face. He knew something nobody on that terrace knew. "Mom," he whispered to the screen, "show them your truth." On the terrace, Diana completed her pre-flight inspection with the same meticulousness her military instructors had drilled into her 20 years earlier. Yes, she'd worked as a technician for 2 decades. But that wasn't her complete story. Diana Carter had served as a military helicopter pilot for 9 years before transitioning to civilian life to raise her son alone. Marina Davidson, pharmaceutical executive, approached technology mogul Robertson discreetly. "Something troubles me about this situation," she murmured. "Her body language, her instrument checks. She doesn't seem amateur at all." Robert nodded. "Gerald's making a catastrophic error. Successful business leaders don't achieve their positions by underestimating people, especially when those people accept impossible challenges with such composure." Inside the helicopter, Diana adjusted her headset and tuned to air traffic control frequency. When her voice finally transmitted over the radio, it carried the military precision of her service years. "Manhattan Tower, helicopter November 5 Bravo Tango, requesting authorization for local flight pattern. Estimated duration 12 minutes. The response came immediately with professional clearance. Some attentive guests noticed the naturalness of that communication. Patricia Hammond, real estate developer, grabbed her husband's arm. Stephen, she just used professional aviation terminology. That's not luck or improvisation. But Gerald remained oblivious to the growing concern among his guests. What he was about to witness would destroy everything he'd built in 63 years. The engine was about to start, and with it, Gerald's entire world would begin to crumble. The helicopter engine roared to life with perfect precision. No hesitation, no failed attempts, no incorrect procedures. The engine started flawlessly on the first ignition, smooth and professional, as if Diana performed this action daily. Gerald's confident smile faltered for the first time. The rotor blades began spinning with increasing velocity, generating the characteristic downdraft that made all guests instinctively retreat. Diana remained composed inside the cabin, her hands executing pre-takeoff procedures with fluency that only emerges from years of experience. Jonathan Ashford gripped Gerald's arm. "Good God, Gerald. I've flown for years, and I recognize genuine expertise when I see it. This woman possesses real training." For the first time since issuing his cruel challenge, Gerald felt genuine uncertainty creeping in. He watched Diana through the cockpit glass, noting her professional concentration, confident posture, and precise movements that left zero margin for error. "Impossible," he muttered. But as the word escaped his lips, that small, persistent voice he'd chosen to ignore began screaming that perhaps he'd made his life's greatest mistake. The helicopter lifted from the terrace with smoothness that stopped Gerald hard. No hesitation, no erratic movement or instability. Diana raised the aircraft as though it were a natural extension of her body, executing a takeoff that even professional pilots would consider flawless. "My God," Jonathan whispered, his aviation experience making him recognize genuine mastery. "Gerald, this woman, she's a real pilot." Gerald felt his legs weaken. The live broadcast continued, and in his Instagram comments, technical observations began flooding in. Users with aviation backgrounds noted her movement precision, professional radio communication, and control ease. "This cannot be happening," Gerald muttered, but his phone's microphone captured his words. 3 million followers witnessed his confidence shatter in real time. Diana executed a perfect circuit around the building, maintaining constant altitude and controlled velocity. Through the terrace's panoramic windows, guests watched her fly with ease that completely demolished Gerald's humiliation narrative. Catherine approached Melissa. "Melissa, did you know? Your expression suggests something isn't right here." Melissa, who'd worked in television production before marriage, recognized when a story was about to explode. "I don't know her true identity, but Gerald just made a terrible mistake before millions." In the live stream comments, the tide shifted rapidly. At Aviation Expert _ Mike, "This is professional level piloting. Who is this woman?" At Helicopter Pilot _ Laura, 18 years in aviation, and I confirm she knows exactly what she's doing. At NYC for Control, she communicated using perfect military terminology. That's not coincidence. Gerald read the comments with escalating horror. "Shut it down," he commanded Sarah, and the broadcast immediately. Gerald, 3 million people are watching, she replied, pale. "If I terminate now, it appears we're concealing something." At that moment, Diana landed the helicopter with surgical precision. The touchdown was so smooth that champagne glasses on adjacent terraces didn't even tremble. But the landing was just the beginning. Diana was about to reveal her true identity, and what came next would not only destroy Gerald Morrison's empire, it would expose secrets that would have him facing criminal prosecution. The real storm was just beginning. Diana stepped from the aircraft, her entire demeanor transformed. No longer the humiliated worker surviving abuse, but radiating the serene confidence of someone who just demonstrated competence before millions. "Satisfied with the flight?" Diana asked, approaching Gerald with steady steps. Gerald opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. Around him, 50 elite guests watched with horror and embarrassment. The situation had completely reversed. Now he was being evaluated and judged. "I fulfill my portion of our agreement," Diana continued, her voice carrying authority that made several guests wonder how they failed to recognize it earlier. "I flew your helicopter before everyone has requested. Diana retrieved her phone and opened an application. While you were entertaining yourself, I took the liberty of researching our host. Gerald's blood turned to ice. What are you doing? Gerald Morrison. Diana read aloud, her voice reaching all guests and continuing live broadcast. Declared assets of $900 million, but recent federal investigation revealed discrepancies of $300 million in undeclared offshore accounts. Shocked murmurs rippled across the terrace. Case number 2024, FR 6634, New York State Supreme Court. Diana continued relentlessly. Investigation for tax evasion, corporate fraud, and securities manipulation. Status: active criminal investigation. Melissa dropped her phone. The live broadcast captured every word, every detail transmitted to millions who now saw Gerald not as a powerful billionaire, but as a potential criminal. And here's the most compelling part. Diana displayed her phone screen to the cameras. 4 former employees suing for workplace harassment. 7 minority vendors defrauded in contracts. 15 families illegally displaced from properties you acquired through corruption. Stop, Gerald shouted, his face crimson with rage and panic. You have no right, he began. Right, Diana interrupted, and for the first time, genuine emotion colored her voice. You just publicly humiliated me, attacked my son, my family, our dignity before millions. Why can you destroy people, but they can't expose truth about you? Diana wasn't finished. Now, regarding my actual identity, she smiled, and something in that smile made several guests instinctively retreat. My full name is Diana Carter Harrison, CEO of Harrison Aviation Systems. The reaction was immediate. Harrison Aviation was one of the East Coast's largest executive aviation companies, valued at $2.8 billion. Catherine covered her mouth. My God, Gerald, you just humiliated one of American aviation's most powerful executives. 12 years in the Air Force. Diana continued, her biography broadcast live to an exponentially growing audience. For commendations for exceptional combat service, test pilot for new military helicopter platforms, and yes, I established my company after military service to raise my son as a single parent. Gerald tried speaking, but his voice emerged as a strangled whisper. The live broadcast had gone viral. Comments flooded in at thousands per second, all demanding accountability. My son Alex, whom you ridiculed so thoroughly, is graduating from MIT's aviation program with a commercial pilot degree, full merit scholarship. And yes, he'll fly commercial aircraft, probably starting with executive jets for people like you. 6 months later, Gerald Morrison's empire had crumbled completely. But Diana's story sparked a movement that would change corporate America forever. What happened next would prove that justice, though sometimes delayed, is inevitable. 6 months later, Gerald Morrison stared from his modest Brooklyn apartment window, a devastating fall from his Manhattan penthouse. The federal investigation had frozen 85% of his assets. Multiple former employees had won 7-figure settlements. His company had declared bankruptcy. That night's live stream accumulated 60 million views. Hashtag Gerald Morrison fraud continued trending. No reputable firm wanted association with his name. Diana, conversely, had transformed the episode into fuel for transformation. Harrison Aviation Systems grew 240% in 6 months, securing contract from corporations valuing authentic diversity. Alex graduated with highest honors and was already piloting corporate aircraft. Mom, Alex said during family dinner, I still can't believe you endured that humiliation just to expose his true character. Diana smiled. Son, I learned in the Air Force that superior battles are won through strategy, not anger. I allowed Gerald to destroy himself with his own arrogance. Catherine Ashford, who'd witnessed everything, became one of the strongest advocates for anti-discrimination initiatives at her foundation. That evening transformed how I perceived privilege and prejudice, she admitted in interviews. Diana's story inspired dozens to speak out against discrimination. 5 executives were terminated after employees documented their abusive conduct. Gerald, isolated and broken, finally understood that power without humanity represents only temporary tyranny. Diana proved that underestimating someone based on appearance is the costliest mistake possible. The genuine victory wasn't destroying Gerald. It was constructing something greater than his pettiness could ever achieve. Never underestimate the power of those you choose to humiliate, because sometimes the person you mock might possess far more strength than you ever imagined. And justice has a remarkable way of balancing the scales. Extended epilogue. Ripples of change a congressional hearing, 495 words. 3 months after Gerald Morrison's empire collapsed, Diana Carter Harrison sat before the House Committee on Workplace Discrimination, invited to testify about systemic bias in corporate America. The hearing room was packed with journalists, activists, and business leaders. Diana wore her Air Force dress uniform, a deliberate choice that commanded immediate respect. Mrs. Harrison, Committee Chair Senator Rebecca Martinez began, "Your experience at night has sparked a national conversation. Can you describe what motivated you to accept such a humiliating challenge?" Diana leaned forward, her voice steady. "Senator, I didn't accept it for myself. I accepted it for every person who's been judged by their appearance, their race, their gender, or their perceived social status. People who don't have the resources or platform to fight back." She paused, letting her words resonate. Gerald Morrison made a critical error. He assumed that because I was a black woman in work clothes carrying a toolbox, I couldn't possibly be his equal or superior. That assumption cost him everything. But here's the tragedy. Thousands of capable people face those same assumptions every single day, and they don't have the luxury of revealing they're actually a CEO or a decorated veteran. Committee member Congressman James Whitfield interjected, "Some critics argue you deliberately deceived Mr. Morrison, that you set a trap." Diana's eyes flashed. "Congressman, I was hired to inspect a helicopter. I arrived in appropriate work attire for that job. I never claimed to be anything other than what I am, an aircraft technician and a pilot." Gerald Morrison's assumptions were entirely his own creation. She pulled out a folder. "Since that evening, my company has received over 12,000 messages from people sharing similar experiences. A Latina doctor mistaken for a janitor in her own hospital. A black software engineer assumed to be the delivery person at his tech firm. An Asian American attorney repeatedly asked when the real lawyer would arrive." Diana opened the folder, revealing pages of printed messages. "This isn't about one billionaire's downfall. It's about a system that trains people to make instantaneous judgments based on superficial characteristics." Senator Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "What solutions do you propose?" "Legislation." Diana responded firmly. "Mandatory bias training isn't enough. We need enforceable penalties for workplace discrimination. We need transparent hiring practices. We need boards of directors that reflect the diversity of America, not just its wealthiest demographic." She glanced at the gallery, where Alex sat in his pilot's uniform, watching his mother with visible pride. "My son shouldn't have to prove he belongs in a cockpit any more than I should have to prove I can fly a helicopter. Competence should be the only credential that matters." The hearing room erupted in applause, an unusual breach of protocol that the committee chair didn't attempt to suppress. But Diana's testimony was just the beginning. Corporate boardrooms across America were about to face a reckoning they never saw coming. The Harrison Aviation scandal will become a case study in business schools worldwide, teaching a lesson that would reshape how power and prejudice intersect. Within weeks of Diana's congressional testimony, a phenomenon began that business analysts would later call the Harrison effect. 7 executives from Fortune 500 companies resigned or were terminated following internal investigations triggered by employees who'd been inspired by Diana's stand. Workers who previously remained silent about discrimination suddenly found their voices. At Morrison Global Enterprises, what remained of Gerald's former empire, the new CEO, appointed by creditors, made a shocking discovery during asset liquidation. "We found something," Janet Pierce told Diana during a private meeting at Harrison Aviation's headquarters. "Hidden in Gerald's personal files. You need to see this." Janet opened her laptop, revealing spreadsheets that made Diana's jaw tighten. He kept records, detailed records of every person he'd publicly humiliated over 15 years. Names, dates, locations, even video files he'd never posted. Diana scrolled through the list. 63 names. A construction worker, a restaurant server, a hotel housekeeper, a delivery driver. All people Gerald had targeted for his cruel entertainment. He called it his reality education archive, Janet said, disgust evident in her voice. He was planning to create an entire content series around humiliating working-class people. Diana sat back, processing this revelation. We need to contact every person on this list. Already started, Janet confirmed. But Diana, there's more. Gerald had been coordinating with 5 other wealthy individuals. They were planning to create a streaming platform dedicated to this content. They had investors lined up, contracts drafted, everything. The implications were staggering. What had happened to Diana wasn't an isolated incident of cruelty. It was part of a systematic plan to monetize humiliation. Who were the other 5? Diana asked. Janet hesitated. That's the problem. 2 are sitting politicians. 1 is a media mogul. The others are venture capitalists with significant influence. This goes deeper than we thought. Diana stood, walking to her office window overlooking the runway where her company's aircraft took off and landed. Her mind raced through possibilities, strategies, consequences. Release everything, she finally said. Diana, these are powerful people. They'll come after you with everything they have. Let them. Diana turned from the window, her expression resolute. I didn't survive combat missions and build a multi-billion-dollar company to back down from bullies. If they want to fight, they'll get one. Janet nodded slowly. There's already interest from investigative journalists. The Washington Post, 60 Minutes, ProPublica, they all want the story. Give it to all of them, Diana decided, simultaneously. No exclusives. This isn't about ratings or clicks. It's about exposure. Over the next 72 hours, Diana coordinated the release of Gerald's files through multiple media outlets. The Harrison Aviation legal team worked around the clock to ensure every document was properly verified and legally sound. Alex watched his mother orchestrate the operation with a mixture of awe and concern. Mom, are you sure about this? These people could destroy you. Diana smiled at her son. Baby, they can try. But I got something they don't. What's that? The truth. And 3 million witnesses who watched it all happen live. The expose would drop at 6 a.m. Eastern Time on a Monday morning. By noon, the entire American corporate landscape would be on fire. But one question remained. Who else would fall when the dominoes started tumbling? The expose detonated across American media like a precision strike. By 9 a.m., the humiliation files was trending worldwide. Gerald Morrison's archived videos showed a pattern, so disturbing that even his former defenders fell silent. 15 years of calculated cruelty, all documented by the perpetrator himself. But the revelation of the planned streaming platform, tentatively titled Reality Check, created a firestorm. Senator Thomas Hartwell, one of the politicians implicated, held a disastrous press conference attempting to claim his involvement was purely advisory. His poll numbers dropped 30 points in a single day. Media mogul Richard Chin issued a statement calling the platform satire and social commentary. His advertisers disagreed, pulling $400 million in contracts within 48 hours. Diana's phone rang constantly. Interview requests, book deals, speaking engagements. She declined most, accepting only platforms that advance her actual goal, systemic change. The real transformation happened in corporate boardrooms and HR departments across America. Melissa Morrison, Gerald's ex-wife, reached out through Diana's attorney. They met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in Midtown Manhattan. I didn't know, Melissa said immediately, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. About the files, the platform, any of it. I thought it was just Gerald being Gerald, cruel, but not systematic. Diana studied the woman who'd filmed her supposed humiliation. You were complicit, Melissa. You held the camera. I know. Melissa's voice cracked. I've been in therapy, trying to understand how I became someone who could participate in that. The privilege, the bubble we lived in. It warped my perception of what was acceptable. She pulled out a checkbook. I know money can't fix what happened, but I've established a foundation. Full-ride scholarships for students from underrepresented backgrounds pursuing careers in aviation. I'm funding it with my divorce settlement. $120 million. Diana remained skeptical. Why should I believe this isn't just image rehabilitation? Because you shouldn't, Melissa replied honestly. Believe it when you see the first scholarship recipients graduate. Believe it when the foundation's still operating in 20 years. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to do something meaningful with the rest of my life. Diana considered this. I want independent oversight. My company's CFO will audit the foundation quarterly. Any misuse of funds, any sign this is a publicity stunt, and I'll expose that too. Melissa nodded. Agreed. They shook hands, not as friends, but as two women who'd been on opposite sides of a defining moment and were now navigating its aftermath. Meanwhile, the Harrison effect continued spreading. 3 major corporations implemented new discrimination reporting systems. 5 states introduced legislation mandating bias training for executives. Harvard Business School created a new case study examining Gerald Morrison's downfall as a cautionary tale about unchecked privilege. Alex graduated and accepted a position with Delta Airlines, not through connections or legacy admissions, but through merit. His first day of training, he wore a small pin his mother had given him. It read simply, "Never underestimate." But Diana's war against systemic discrimination was far from over. The most powerful opponents were still lurking in the shadows, and they were planning their counterattack. What Diana didn't know was that exposing Gerald Morrison had made her a target for people far more dangerous than a failed billionaire.